Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. Welcome to the Impact webinar, Scaling New Heights of Europe's Hydrogen Economy, Means of Accomplishing the 20 Million Ton Goal. My name is Aling Tang, Assistant Content Analyst at Leader Associates, and it's my great honor to be your host for today's session. In pursuit of the ambitious target of 20 million tons set by REPowerEU, green hydrogen has emerged as a vital component of the EU's energy transition strategy. As the global market for green hydrogen grows more competitive, it's time to consider our next course of action. This webinar is a digital part of our prestigious physical gathering, Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2024, taking place on June the 25th to 27th at IFEMA Madrid in Spain. CGHE unites top decision makers from all sectors of the hydrogen value chain and offers promising insights to enhance the development of clean hydrogen and accelerate sustainability efforts. Here, I would also like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our diamond sponsor Aviva, platinum sponsor Chart, sustainability partner Enagás Renewable, and Hydrogen Project's roadshow partner Hydeal. Thank you for your support. In today's session, we'll dive deep into the European green hydrogen market and try and get a comprehensive understanding of the market dynamics, policy framework, and financial support mechanisms. We'll also follow the footprint of leading countries like Spain and Germany to explore their respective positions in the market. We'll find out about the latest progress made in infrastructure construction, and we'll hear from prominent energy companies' visions on green hydrogen development and investment. Lastly, we'll cast our gaze towards a new era of mega projects, where we study the case that will shape the future of the European green hydrogen market. And before we start, please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared online. We encourage active participation in the Q&A sessions following each presentation. Without further delay, I'm honored to introduce our distinguished opening speaker, Ms. Stefanie Hiesinger, Head of Unit for Low Carbon Solutions, Research and Low Carbon Technology Deployment at the European Commission, to share with us EU's latest policy framework and financial mechanisms. Welcome, Ms. Hiesinger. The stage is yours now.
Good morning, everybody, and sorry for this little hiccup in the beginning of the presentation. It's an honor for me to be in this webinar to present to you the European strategy to the hydrogen economy. It all started, in 2020, or you could even say it started a bit earlier in 2019 when the EU adopted its Green Deal. And as part of the European Green Deal in 2020, the EU presented its hydrogen strategy, which is a comprehensive framework to support the uptake of renewable and low-carbon hydrogen in the EU. The strategy had a set of 20 key actions. I will not go into the details of all those key actions, but as a flagship from 2020 to 2024, we announced to support the installation of at least 6 gigawatt of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers in the EU and the production of up to 1 million tons of renewable hydrogen. And then in the medium term, we envisaged to become for hydrogen to become an intrinsic part of our integrated energy system and to have at least 40 gigawatt of renewable hydrogen electrolyzers and the production of 10 million tons of hydrogen domestically in the EU by 2030. And then from 2030 onwards, renewable hydrogen should be deployed at large scale across all hard to decarbonize sectors in the EU. Of course, a lot has happened since 2020, since our first hydrogen strategy was published, and so we had to go through a pandemic, lockdowns, economic downturns, followed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the Commission's response to it was the REPowerEU plan, where we are also aiming at unlocking the renewable hydrogen potential. We're trying to accelerate our clean energy transition. So what happened? The Repower EU plan increased our targets for renewable hydrogen by 2030. So the new targets would be 10 million tons produced in the EU and 10 million tons of hydrogen imported to, on the one hand, decarbonize the transport sector, decarbonize the industrial processes, but also use for feedstock, and then also for hydrogen to play an essential role in the future grid. So how are we going to get there? Or maybe first of all to say that, of course, it's easy maybe to announce a target, but it's still a long way to go. So 20 million tons of hydrogen corresponds to 160 to 200 gigawatt of electrolyzer output capacity and 300 gigawatt to 400 gigawatt of renewable capacity. Today we have less, or in 2023, we had less than 400 megawatt of electrolyzer capacity installed worldwide and only 160 megawatt capacity in the EU. And the annual electrolyzer manufacturing capacity was 7 gigawatt in 2020. So we know the potential is high, but the road to unlock it is still long. And we have still a lot to be done in the EU. That's why in 2022, the European Commission's president, Ursula von der Leyen, in her State of the Union speech, announced the European Hydrogen Bank initiative. The European Hydrogen Bank would address both our ambitions on imports as well as the domestic market creation, with two new financing mechanisms to support renewable hydrogen production within the EU and internationally. Despite its name, the European Hydrogen Bank is not a bank per se, it's not a physical institution, but it is essential to reinforce, our financing streams in the EU and globally. The objectives of the renewable hydrogen are threefold. It's, as I said, to support the uptake of renewable hydrogen within the EU as well as imports. It also aims to unlock private investments in hydrogen value chains by connecting the renewable energy supply to demand and then also addressing initial investment challenges. And it will create an emerging European hydrogen market, offer growth opportunities and jobs, and then also help us reach the goals that I just set out. To go more into the details, what is the architecture of the European Hydrogen Bank? So the European Hydrogen Bank has a domestic leg and an international leg. For the international leg, we would set up a green premium auction for renewable hydrogen imports. The intention is to cover the cost gap between renewable hydrogen produced in third countries and transported to the EU and the fossil fuels it can replace. For this instrument, the Commission is currently exploring possible sources of funding within the EU budget and also a partnership with, for example, the European Investment Bank. The domestic leg, and that is what I will in the next minutes focus on, is also a green premium auction under the EU Innovation Fund. We are launching this auction at the end of this month on the 23rd of November. And we are all looking with interest into the potential bids that come our way. Transparency and coordination is also one of the important pillars of the European Hydrogen Bank. We will be able to assess demand. We will also track hydrogen flows. We will be able to get more information on infrastructure needs and hydrogen cost data as well through those initiatives. And of course, there's a lot, there are many links with existing European financing instruments. I just already mentioned the Innovation Fund that is actually financing the domestic hydrogen auctions, but also programs like Invest EU or structural funds provide synergies with the European Hydrogen Bank initiatives, and then also is existing international financing instruments like concessional loans, blending and guarantees will support the international leg of the Hydrogen Bank. Well, the Hydrogen Bank will play a coordination role and facilitate the blending. It will de-risk hydrogen projects and allow us to maximize private capital leverage, and then also increase the confidence of investors. As I said, it will increase the transparency on flows, on costs, and support the infrastructure planning. I mentioned the Innovation Fund. The Innovation Fund is financing the domestic leg of the Hydrogen Bank, on which I will go into details just now after that. But I also want to mention it because it's actually a funding tool that we have that is through grants already financing deployment of hydrogen projects across the EU. So it's a program that is financed by the proceeds of the EU emissions trading system. There's an estimated budget of 40 billion euros up until 2030 that is available. It's not only financing hydrogen, but it's financing innovative projects in energy-intensive industries, renewables, batteries, carbon capture and storage, and net zero mobility and buildings. It's quite an important instrument because, well, it's one of the world's largest funding programs, and it's not funding R&I, but it's really funding the stage between a technology that is already mature, but that is not yet market ready. And we do have quite many projects that are funded through grants already in the area of hydrogen. And now the auctions, also supported or funded by the Innovation Fund, are coming on top of these grants under the Innovation Fund. Going more specifically into the auctions, why are we doing these auctions for renewable hydrogen? Well, first of all, auctions are a cost-efficient, market-based instrument to provide financial support. Again, we aim to de-risk projects and maximize leverage of private capital, which is best done through such an auction mechanism. But it will also allow us price discovery and market formation. So what is actually the price of a kilo of hydrogen in this nascent market? We will see those price points and discover them as we see the bids under this first pilot auction that's going to be launched. And of course, the hydrogen auctions are a relatively lenient way to provide the support, which will reduce the administrative burden that is often perceived as too complex. The auctions in a nutshell, what are we going to do? So we have a budget of 800 million euros from the Innovation Fund. We will auction renewable hydrogen, so RFNBO hydrogen in the sense of the definition of the Delegated Act of the Renewable Energy Directive. The support will be provided in form of a fixed premium in euros per kilogram of renewable hydrogen produced over a period of 10 years. The bids will be ranked on price, so the budget will be allocated to the projects with the lowest specific support requirements, so the lowest price bid. It's a pay-as-bid auction, so if you bid €1 per kilogram of hydrogen, but the clearing price is at €3, then you will be awarded €1 per kilogram of hydrogen, as this is what you bid. It's output-based support upon verified and certified production of RFNBO volumes, so there's not going to be any payment before entry into operation, and the maximum realization period for the projects is 5 years. As you can see, or you saw already on the previous slide, of course, there are some non-awarded bids, and I'll give you a bit of a look into the future because we are, of course, depending on the success of these auctions, looking at the next steps, and there is potential to expand the auctions and as a service for member states. So what we are discussing is to have a window that is called auctions as a service, whereby member states can provide additional budget and clear lowest bids from their own member state only until the national budget is exhausted. So anything that we will not be able to finance from the European budget, member states could finance, and that kind of award of financing is subject to state aid control. Of course, member states who are not contributing cannot award their national bids. And if, or in case we see that the auction is a success, of course, the concept can also be further extended to other products, or or we can have another round with a higher budget, but that remains to be assessed based on the outcome of this first pilot auction to be launched on the 23rd of November. Finally, of course, well, the picture is much better now, but there are still some challenges ahead. We still have to finalize some of the policies, in particular the hydrogen and gas decarbonization package. We will also continue to deploy the infrastructure, and there's the Connecting Europe facility that will help us contribute to that. And then the investments have also to be finalized. So we need to make sure that projects move to final investment decisions, because for the majority of project that is still pending, and we hope that we can make an important contribution with these auctions to incentivize taking these final investment decisions. Thank you, and I'm open for questions from the audience if there are any.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hiesinger, for your informative and detailed speech. And let's see the questions raised by our audience. So the first one is, I can see one question in our Q&A box. This is from Philipp. How is EU going to achieve 6 gigawatts in installing electrolyzer power until 2024? And I think, in my understanding, the question is like, according to the EU Hydrogen Strategy 2020, are we still aligned with the target, or do we have additional expectations next year?
Well, as I said, we're doing a lot, and there are lots of projects being funded under the Innovation Fund grants program, but also with the auctions, we're trying to do what we can to meet those targets. But final investment decisions are still pending. There's also some extra hurdles that some of the companies are facing, but we're doing what we can to meet our targets, or to at least get closer to those targets, or the closest that we can.
Thank you. And the second question is from our side. We'd like to ask, what is your expectation towards this 2023 auction?
Well, I think it's a pilot auction, so everybody is looking at it with a lot of curiosity, us included. So we have been moving very quickly in from the announcement to making the terms and conditions available. There has been less than a year. I think we have a solid architecture for the auctions, and now, of course, we look at the potential bidders, that they come forward with their bids. And we hope it's going to be a success. I think the ingredients are there. If it's a success, then we are looking, as I said, already at the future, and it would be a really good tool to support the renewable hydrogen production domestically, and also to potentially further expand the concept. But all of this, as you seem to hint to, is really depending on the success of these auctions. There's a lot of there are many possibilities how this can be further developed, including higher budgets. But we look at the market now. We already receive also some positive feedback. Stakeholders have been deeply involved in the design of these auctions. So as I said, the ingredients are there, but now we have to make it happen.
Thank you. And I can see another question from Ayana. It's about, I think the question is implying bilateral partnership. And I think if bilateral partnership can also receive support from the funding, so how do you see it being managed in financing green hydrogen incentives in EU? Like who will benefit from this funding?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, I have to admit, because while the beneficiaries of the funding are the producers of the renewable hydrogen on the one hand, for the auctions, but then also for the grants, it's the project developers, of course. Partnerships, you can come to us with a consortium, that's not an issue, but of course the bidder has to be clearly identified as part of the auctions. But as I said, I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
So let me address it in another way. And how do you see the public-private partnerships being managed?
Well, I mean, we have possibilities. I mean, it's a tricky question in the sense that the auctions, at least we will have to identify an entity that is the bidder, and of course also then there are strict accumulation rules. So if you have a public-private partnership, the question for us is there any state aid involved, and we will have to see. But in principle, we of course also welcome, there are 16 member states in the EU that have hydrogen strategies, so we are trying to streamline, our initiatives with those of the member states and try to create as many synergies as possible.
Thank you. Thank you for your detailed answers. And thanks again for joining us today. I can see there are still like 2 or 3 questions in our Q&A box. So we also welcome you to type your answers in the Q&A box. And now let's move on to our next keynote, brought by Mr. Jose Luis Cabo Sánchez, Deputy Director General for Hydrocarbons and New Fuels at Ministry for the Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge of Spain. Unfortunately, due to a tight schedule, Mr. Cabo could not attend in person, but instead he has pre-recorded a video of his presentation. And now we'll share the video with you.
Good morning to everyone. First, I would like to express my complete gratitude to the organizing committee of this webinar for inviting me as a speaker today. I will be presenting the measures to create a hydrogen hub in Spain and how we are implementing them. And to provide a comprehensive understanding, I will begin with a short overview of the broader European context where Spain plays and will continue playing a significant role in the near future. Over the past few years, hydrogen has emerged as a crucial component in the energy policies worldwide. The International Energy Agency recognized the significance of renewable hydrogen in achieving a net zero scenario by 2050. Similarly, at the European level, hydrogen assumes a pivotal role in the European Green Deal and the REPowerEU plan. The European Union acknowledged that the widespread adoption of renewable hydrogen, green ammonia, and other related products will expedite the decarbonization of our energy system, while significantly, of course, decreasing the EU's reliance on fossil fuels imports. Nevertheless, to fully actualize the potential of the renewable hydrogen sector, it is crucial to establish robust regulations that provide clear foundations to ensure integrity and consistency in the utilization of this energy vector. This regulatory framework should encompass various aspects along the entire value chain of renewable hydrogen, starting from its production, which is currently regarded as an industrial activity, to its logistics, distribution through storage facilities or infrastructures, and ultimately its utilization as either a raw material or an energy resource. In light of these developments, significant modifications to existing regulations and the introduction of new regulatory frameworks are underway at the European level under the Fit for 55 initiative. For instance, in February of this year, the Commission adopted two delegated acts mandated by the Renewable Energy Directive. This act proposed rules to precisely define renewable hydrogen in the EU. More recently, in March, the Council approved the general approach for revising the regulatory framework governing the hydrogen and natural gas sector, the directive and the regulation. Now we expect to close under the Spanish presidency of the EU Council the trilogue negotiations. During the same months, the Commission unveiled the initial plans for the European Hydrogen Bank alongside the proposal for the Net Zero Industry Act. And 2 weeks ago, we have seen the new call of the Innovation Fund with more than 4 billion allocated to clean technology projects. We all may acknowledge that renewable hydrogen stands at the core of the current European energy and industry policies, and it has been playing a leading role during the Spanish presidency of the EU Council. To kickstart the 6-month presidency period, we hosted an event in Madrid, Spain, bringing together representatives from the EU member states and the European Commission. The primary objective of this gathering was to engage in discussions regarding the current state and the future prospect of renewable hydrogen value chains. The event aimed to lay down the groundwork for upcoming milestones in the hydrogen roadmap in our country. In addition to the carbon negotiations and the gas package, we must highlight the agreement reached by the Council at the end of October to reform the electricity market, a major step forward to boost renewables in Europe and of course in Spain. Last but not least, the European Commission is moving forward the definition of the next projects of common European interest, which of course will include projects to ensure that the creation of a hydrogen market in Europe will be a reality in 2030. Now, turning to the national context of Spain, renewable hydrogen holds immense importance in decarbonizing our economy and achieving climate targets. It serves as a viable solution for hard-to-abate sectors such as heavy-duty transport and high-temperature industrial processes. Spain, of course, is well positioned to capitalize on the potential arising from a new economy centered around renewable hydrogen. We possess abundant renewable resources, and we have established a robust value chain that is prepared to lead the development of this energy vector. Our proactive approach began with the implementation of measures across various domains. First and foremost, we took strategic actions by approving our renewable hydrogen roadmap in 2020, while the European hydrogen roadmap aimed to achieve 40 gigawatts of electrolysis by 2030. Spain's roadmap set a target of 4 gigawatt installed electricity capacity by the same year, representing 10% of the EU objective. With nearly 500,000 tons of fossil hydrogen being consumed annually in Spain, there are significant potential for rapid and direct decarbonization in our country. In fact, based on the project pipeline within our country, we anticipate surpassing our initial estimate of 25% renewable hydrogen consumption by 2030. However, after the revision of our National Integrated Energy and Climate Plan this summer, to cope with the repowering ambitions, we have envisioned a more interesting future. We just increased our hydrogen target in order to reach 11 gigawatts of electricity capacity in 2030, which is only a proof of the potential of the Spanish renewable energy sector and the commitment of the government to continue in this decarbonization line. Additionally, the Renewable Hydrogen Roadmap outlines various other targets for 2030, including the development of a fleet of 200 hydrogen fuel cell buses, 150 hydrogen fueling stations, and the establishment of 2 commercial train lines powered by hydrogen, among other objectives. Furthermore, regulatory measures have been approved recently to expedite the hydrogen development. Some of these measures will include the elimination of some of the tariffs to access the electricity grids. We have regulated the figure of isolated renewable gas grids in order to promote the construction of these infrastructures close to the production sites. And the entry, of course, into force in March of a system to guarantee the origin of the renewable gas, which includes a registry for facilities engaged in the production of gases from renewable sources. This registry encompasses all renewable gases, including renewable hydrogen, of course. Under this system, each warranty of origin will represent 1 megawatt-hour of renewable gas produced and will be issued in favor of the gas producer. In addition to the planning and regulation, Spain is actively supporting the development of hydrogen through the utilization of the Next Generation funds. In December 2021, the government approved the so-called PERTE, Strategic Project for Economic Recovery and Transformation, dedicated to renewables, storage, and renewable hydrogen. Under this PERTE, a total of 6 calls for aid associated with renewable hydrogen have been launched, amounting to 720 million euros. These calls have been garnered significant interest and positive reception from the industry. 2 of these calls specifically targeted singular pioneer projects. The objective was to provide support for the implementation of integrated hydrogen production, distribution, and consumption projects within the same geographical location. The demand for aid in this category was 5 times higher than the allocated budget for the calls. The remaining 4 calls were focused on boosting the entire value chain of hydrogen. Their purpose was to foster technical knowledge and productive capacity by encouraging advancements in various aspects of the hydrogen value chain. In this case, the requested aid surpassed the budget of the call by a factor of 2. During this spring, 4 out of the 6 call proposals were already resolved. Notably, the projects awarded through these calls will contribute to the installation of approximately 500 megawatts of electrolysis capacity across different regions of the country. Furthermore, as part of the PERTE initiative, a dedicated line has been established to support significant projects of common European interest. Spain has demonstrated its leadership and active involvement in the first 2 waves of the important project of common European interest, IPCEI, for hydrogen, namely high to tech and high to use. In the first wave of the hydrogen IPCEI, the European Commission selected a total of 41 projects and Spain contributed with 4 projects to this selection. Similarly, in the second wave of the hydrogen IPCEI, Spain participation remained strong, with 7 projects out of the 35 projects chosen by the European Commission. The second wave projects collectively account for a significant electrolysis capacity of 1.2 gigawatts. Moreover, Spain is actively participating in the High to Move wave, which was pre-notified to the European Commission in September. This participation signifies Spain's ongoing engagement in the development of hydrogen technologies and their integration into various sectors. Spain's strong presence in these IPCEI waves highlights the country's prominent role in the European hydrogen landscape and reinforces its commitment to driving forward the energy transition and the widespread adoption of renewable hydrogen technologies. These were only the first hydrogen call within the PERTE, but we will have more coming in the near future. We are currently working on the rest of the instruments. For instance, Spain has identified some areas in our country where hydrogen ecosystems could be established and developed, benefiting from economies of scale to bring down renewable hydrogen costs. Therefore, we are working on a new funding instrument aimed at the promotion of hydrogen valleys or clusters. In order to support these initiatives, we will allocate additional funds coming from the addendum of the recovery plan. More recently, in order to continue taking firm steps towards the development of renewable hydrogen, we have created the Renewable Hydrogen Advisory Group to gather the sector's opinion and suggestions. This group will serve as a forum for discussion among the stakeholders involved in the renewable hydrogen sector, with the participation of the General State Administration, and will aim to identify, coordinate and prioritize actions that facilitate the adaptation of strategies and regulations to the role of renewable hydrogen in the new energy context. And finally, as most of you may know, Spain has a strong commitment to support the creation of a hydrogen market. And in this sense, the selection and publication of the next PCI list by the European Commission will be fundamental. projects such as H2Med, envisaging a route to take hydrogen being produced in the Iberian Peninsula to North Europe, is only the first step to reach different objectives: decarbonization of our industry, energy independence to ensure security of supply, and of course, stable and affordable energy prices in Europe. In conclusion, Spain is fully committed to accelerating renewable hydrogen competency and ultimately with the energy and ecological transition. The public sector has the opportunity and responsibility to accompany the private sector in this pursuit. We are creating, therefore, a good ecosystem to support private investments and identifying the locations where renewable hydrogen will be produced massively. Therefore, we all must create a common front to overcome the barriers and to work in a regulation that allows us to develop the sector as quickly as possible as a response to the national ambition and their power EU objective. Thank you very much.
And following Spain's ongoing journey towards becoming Europe's leading hydrogen hub, now please join me and give a warm welcome to our next distinguished speaker, Dr. Philipp Stammler, Head of the National Hydrogen Strategy Department at German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, who will share with us Germany's updates on their national hydrogen strategy. Welcome, Dr. Stammler. The stage is yours now.
Thank you very much, Eileen, and hello to everyone. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I would like to share with you some thoughts on the updated German national hydrogen strategy. Thank you very much for showing the slides. Germany has adopted its first national hydrogen strategy in 2020, and this year, after long and very intense discussions within the German government, we decided upon an update of the strategy against the backdrop of the Ukrainian war, the Russian-Ukrainian war, and the new climate targets that Germany has been set after the first initial strategy was adopted in 2020. And in this regard, please, to the next slide. Just as a little reminder of why are we doing this, why are we putting so much effort on the ramp up of the hydrogen market. You can see here on this slide the GHG emissions of Germany from 1990 and up to today, and forecast for the future. As you can see, some progress has been made over the last years, but in order to reach our ambitious climate targets, which foresee climate neutrality by 2045, a lot more has to be done, and this won't be possible without the usage of hydrogen, especially without green hydrogen. So against this backdrop, the update of the national hydrogen strategy has been taking place, and the ambitions that were already quite high in the first 2020 strategy have been put a little bit higher in our 23 strategy. On the next slide, you can see the 4 fields of action that Germany has taken into our focus for the update of the hydrogen strategy. First of all, obviously, we want to do our very best to ensure that the demand for hydrogen will be met in the next years, so that there will be enough hydrogen, especially green hydrogen, to meet the demand in the industry and the other sectors. Secondly, and this goes hand in hand with the first ambition, we need a ambitious hydrogen infrastructure in order to transport the hydrogen from the outside world into Germany and within Germany. And thirdly, we have to help the various sectors that will offtake the hydrogen to be able to actually do this, as we will see very high prices in the first years to come, maybe even in the first decades to come, compared to the prices of fossil fuels that have to be put out of the market. And fourth, last but not least, we have to do a lot more to create good framework conditions in order for all players involved in the value chain to be able to produce the hydrogen, to transport it, to import it, and to use it in the various sectors. So these are the 4 goals of action that I would like to take a closer look now on the next slides. First of all, we're looking at our first goal to ensure that the availability of hydrogen will be high enough in the next years. If you could go to the next slide, please. So for 2030, I'm very sorry. I'm just seeing here on the screen that there seems to be a problem with the slides. I hope you can read it. Here in my printout, it looks a little bit different, but I hope still you can read it. There's a little overlap in the writing here. Well, our first goal is to set up by 2030 10 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity within Germany, so that we have a base stock of 10 gigawatts production capacity within Germany to meet the baseline of demand within Germany. In total, you can see that on the right side, we foresee a demand by 2030 of 95 up to 130 terawatt hours of hydrogen, as I said, by 2030. This means that if we reach our target of 10 gigawatt electrolyzer capacity, there will be a huge gap which has to be filled by imports. Approximately between 45 to 90 terawatt hours of the hydrogen demand will have to be imported into Germany. Currently, around 55 terawatt hours of hydrogen are being used mainly in the industry sector as of now per year. And obviously, this is mainly gray hydrogen, which has to be replaced by green and low carbon hydrogen in the next years. If you could go to the next slide, please. Our focus in the National Hydrogen Strategy is obviously on green hydrogen, so hydrogen being produced by renewable energy. And we will only provide direct financial support when it comes to production of hydrogen for the production of green hydrogen. But obviously, we can't only rely on green hydrogen in the years to come. So in the strategy, after very long discussions within the government, we also agreed upon the openness for blue, orange, turquoise hydrogen, so low carbon hydrogen techniques that we will also provide financial support for when it comes to the offtake of hydrogen. So on the production side, only financial support for green hydrogen. On the offtake side, also financial support for other forms of low carbon hydrogen. And when it comes to transport infrastructure, obviously we will be colorblind and provide the necessary infrastructure for all sorts of hydrogen to be transported within Germany. Now looking at the next field of action, if you could go to the next slide. This is, as I said, the hydrogen infrastructure. You could skip this one and already go to the next slide. Here you can see a map, a draft of the first core grid that Germany is planning to realize by 2032. This will comprise up to approximately 10,000 kilometers of hydrogen pipelines throughout Germany. Approximately 60% of these will be refurbished old natural gas pipelines, and approximately the other 40% will be newly built hydrogen pipelines. Within the IPCEI process, we have already foreseen roughly 2,000 kilometers of pipelines to be being constructed under the IPCEI umbrella. And we're currently working on the framework conditions, the rules, regulation for the building of the core grid, including rules on transport tariffs, feeding in tariffs. And also in this regard, we will use huge amounts of government money to allow for subsidized feeding in tariffs in order to allow for, or in order to give the TSOs the necessary framework conditions to have the availability to build up this core network that we foresee here by 2032. Now, the next field of action, if you could go to the next slide, or you could skip this slide and go to the next one, is which sectors do we focus on when it comes to the demand side, to the offtake of hydrogen. We will focus obviously on the hard-to-abate sectors, mainly the industry sector. In this regard, the government has already drafted a carbon contract for difference program, which is being put into action within the next month, and which will allow carbon industry to apply for within a bidding procedure to apply for subsidies to use green hydrogen and low carbon hydrogen in the next years in order to replace fossil raw materials that are being used right now. For the transport sector, there are also various programs and framework conditions, last least the RED II targets for the transport sector, which have been transformed into national law in Germany. So there already is a high push for the transport industry to use green hydrogen in the years to come. And we already see a couple of projects in the refinery sectors where refineries are applying for the necessary conditions in order to use green hydrogen in their industrial processes. When it comes to the power sector and the heating sector, if you could go to the next slide, thank you very much. We have already a big focus on the power sector. This is also a big difference to the first hydrogen strategy from 2020, where the power sector did not play a very important role at this point of time. As of now, we see a high demand in the power sector by 2045, up to 140 terawatt hours per annum, only in this sector. And currently the government is working on a strategy for carbon neutral power plants, which will allow for the building of dedicated hydrogen power plants, but also for H2 ready gas power plants. And this is to be published very shortly and will allow also for up to 16 gigawatts of power sector capacity in the years up to 2013. So there will also be a big push on the demand side for the offtake of green and low carbon hydrogen. With regard to the building sector, we don't see a very broad application by 2013. So we mainly see in regional clusters some areas where hydrogen might play a role by 2013. In the long term, this will be a big issue for hydrogen-fueled CHP plants, and in other areas where very high temperature applications are being used. But we don't see a broad application in the broad level of heating for homes for the whole area of Germany. So if we could go to the last field of action, creating good framework conditions. Also here, a lot has been done already. We have put in place some subsidizing instruments. I've mentioned already the carbon contracts for difference program, which is being to be rolled out very shortly. We are being in the process of adopting the delegated act on green hydrogen by the European Commission. We are currently working on a law to streamline and simplify procedures for planning and approval for electrolyzers and pipelines and other transport technologies. So this will be something that will be published probably in the course of this year. And we have set up a number of other financing instruments for building electrolyzers and also for the offtake of hydrogen mainly in the industry sector. What we're focusing very much right now on is the area of certification and accrediting green hydrogen. So we're building up a registry, first of all, to certify the goals for the transport sector, but also for other industrial sectors in the years to come. Part of this, a lot of instruments also for the import of hydrogen have been set up. I would only like to mention the H2 Global mechanism that has been put in place 2 years ago already, and where we have called for bids roughly 1 billion euros for the import of hydrogen into Germany. We're currently working on a new call for bids, which is to be published also in a short time frame, and where the government has planned to use roughly 3 billion euros additionally in order to call for the import of green hydrogen into Germany. With this, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any question at all.
Thank you so much for your instructive presentation. And here we've got some questions from our audience. The first question is, what is Germany's expected demand for green hydrogen in the next 5 years?
Thank you very much. What I've shown in the presentation, we foresee a demand of between 95 to 130 terawatt hours of hydrogen by 2013. Obviously, as of now, we have consumption of 55 terawatt hours of gray hydrogen. So this is something which could be transformed immediately, which is just a question of transportation and production. So we're starting with 55 terawatt hours and aiming for around 130 terawatt hours by 2030.
Thank you. And a question from the Q&A box. Will Germany provide financial support to the countries that will export green hydrogen to Germany?
Yes, thank you very much. We have various financial instruments for the export, or rather the import of hydrogen. The most important one was the one that I mentioned in my presentation, the H2 Global program. This works as a two-sided auction. We call for bids for exporters of hydrogen into Germany. So we buy green hydrogen or derivatives from the worldwide market and subsidize the prices. And then we will sell the numbers that we bought on the worldwide market. We will sell them domestically with a second call for bids. So yes, we will provide financial support for exporters.
Thank you. And the third question is that is there a planned pipeline of areas for offshore hydrogen production?
Well, there are a number of consortia that are interested in going into the offshore production of hydrogen. What we have done so far is that we have foreseen a dedicated offshore field in the North Sea, which will not be connected to the electricity grid. So this will be or can be used for setting up windmills and using the electricity offshore. So basically to produce the hydrogen offshore, and we're currently discussing on how to connect this this offshore field with the new hydrogen pipeline grid that has to be built up in the future. And we're also expecting a call for bids for this dedicated offshore field in the next months to come.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer, Dr. Stammler. And thank you again for joining us. And now it's time to look at our next topic, which revolves around the green hydrogen infrastructure and the recent advancement in H2Med. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Mr. Anthony Mazzanga, Chief Business Development Officer of GRT Gas, as he takes the stage. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me share with you some insight about what's going on around the H2Med corridor. Just try to, okay. Yeah, now I'm sharing my screen. So before going into the H2Med corridor, maybe just a quick word about GRT Gas. So GRT Gas is one of the leading gas transmission operator in Europe. We are one of the leader in France, of course, but we are also active in Germany, in the south of Germany, with a subsidiary called GRT Gas Deutschland, and we also own LNG, a subsidiary operating LNG terminal. So you have basically the key figures of the company. I will not go through them, but just in a nutshell, our strategy now is clearly to embrace energy transition. We know that the gas transit will slow down due to energy efficiency, to switching to electricity, but also we are completely dedicated to connect biomethane to our grid. But clearly, part of our strategy is to be active in the area of H2 transportation and CO2 transportation, and it's obviously the topic today. What we believe in terms of H2 is that H2 was for years and years a chemical commodity. I would say not a commodity, a specialty, in fact, with very few players involved in the market of hydrogen. But hydrogen and renewable hydrogen is going to be an energy, and as such, the market is in search of competitiveness, of security of supply. It's a main topic in gas, of course, but also in electricity, and it will be a topic in hydrogen. And linked to the security of supply, of course, all the services around balancing and storage are also, we know, a key interest for producers and customers, future customers of hydrogen. So as a TSO, in fact, we want to be for the hydrogen market, what we are for the gas market, meaning that we want to be an independent TSO. Our business is really transportation, and we will not do the business of our customers. We will not produce hydrogen. We are clearly an enabler of an organized market, meaning that we not only we provide capacity, transmission capacity, but we also provide all the infrastructure for an organized market to function. So meaning nomination, trading capabilities, metering, traceability, and other data. It's part clearly of what we want to offer. We are committed to a third part access approach, an open infrastructure approach. It will be, of course, mandatory probably in the future in Europe, depending of the ongoing trialogue on the gas package. But for the moment, we already decided to go on this model of third-party access. And of course, we invest and we have a strong planification and optimization process, and meaning that we adapt the infrastructure with prospective approach and 10-year development approach. We are also a big player in the field of R&D with our subsidiary RISE. RISE is clearly developing capabilities, R&D capabilities around gas pipe repurposing for our own, of course, needs, but also for needs of other TSOs or other O&M in the hydrogen industry. Now let's go deeper in the H2 corridor, H2 Med corridor. So H2 Med is one of the corridors that were identified by the European Commission in the REPowerEU communication, and H2 Med is in fact a very important corridor, meaning the aim of the corridor is to link the production in the south of Europe, southwest of Europe, Portugal and Spain, but of course it can also in the future be connected to Morocco, Mauritania, or other Maghreb countries. Here we have area with possibility to produce low-cost renewable hydrogen from photovoltaic electricity, and the corridor will be able to transport this hydrogen through France towards the heart of Europe, meaning Germany, Belgium, and other neighboring countries. The capacity of this corridor is 2 megaton per year of H2, and we are speaking of pure H2 and no blending here. It's only dedicated to H2. And the expected transmission tariff should be in the range of the European hydrogen backbone, meaning between 11 and 21 cents per kilo per 1,000 of kilometer. It's a little bit too soon to give a very exact economic figures, but of course, what you see there is the transmission costs, in fact, are quite low compared to the production cost, and of course, compared to the interest to be connected to a broader market and be connected to storage through this corridor. So I will not go in further details on projects in Portugal and Spain where GRTgaz is not directly involved, but let me show you some figures of what's going on the project around France and around GRTgaz activity. So the first big pipeline we are speaking about in the H2 Med corridor is the Barmar, so Barcelona-Marseille hydrogen offshore pipeline. It's a project between partners. GRTgaz, of course, is involved, but also Enagás from Spain, REN from Portugal, Terriga, and we are also now discussing with Open Grid Europe that should join the H2 Med consortium in the future. For the Barmar project, so it's an offshore pipeline. Offshore because we want to avoid difficult discussion and acceptability of an onshore project going through the Pyrenees mountains and a very natural area between France and Spain. So going offshore is a way to have a more easy route and more acceptable in terms of environmental impact. The route options are still under scrutiny. Two main options. One is a near coast option, easier in terms of technical aspects, but with some difficulties, some canyons, in fact, to cross. But also, if we are close to the coast, of course, the acceptability issue can be higher than the deeper route. So you have the figure here. It's quite a big project, and it's in fact the biggest offshore hydrogen offshore project in the world for the moment. So the capacity is linked directly to the capacity of the whole H2 Med corridor, meaning 2 megaton per year of hydrogen transmission capacity. We are launching the pre-FEED study on this project. By the end of the year, we will select the engineering firms that will carry these pre-FEED studies. And of course, we apply to the PCI process. So Barmar is in the list of the Commission. So we expect to be labelized PCI beginning of next year. If we go further, Barmar is connected to the other GRT gas project in France. The main project around H2Med is the Hyphen project. The Hyphen is connecting Marseille to Germany, going through a big industrial area like near Lyon city. So it's clearly a very important onshore pipeline. Part of it will be based on repurposed natural gas pipelines. Part will be new pipelines, and the same status as Barmar. We are now launching the pre-FEED study in order to be ready by 2030 to offer transmission capacity to the market. What is interesting also is to consider the project around, in fact, the main corridor. For example, Hyphen is a local project near Marseille in south of France, but it's really important and linked to the corridor because Hyphen, in fact, the aim is to connect local industrial customers to H2Med corridor, but also to connect underground storage in Manosque, nearby Marseille. This project, Manosque is an area where there is already storage of oil and gas in salt caverns, and the storage operators are in fact launching projects around hydrogen storage. And clearly, H2Med is not only a transmission project, it's also a project to connect producers and customers to underground storage. So you see here Manosque in the south of France. You have also Étré in the north of Lyon, and other underground storage in the east part of France, nearby the German frontier, the German border. So it's really a key, in fact, to offer not only transmission, but also storage capacity. Hyphen is also connected to other networks, such as Mosaic and Rhine in the east part of France, connecting to some part of Germany and Switzerland. We also develop an interconnection with Belgium. It's not directly in the corridor, but of course it's a way to broaden, in fact, the impact of H2Med corridor with our project. And lastly, maybe to describe the whole corridor, H2Med is clearly now linked to Hercules project in Germany. So GRT Gas, GRT Gas Deutschland, and Open Grid Europe are in partnership, in fact, to develop the capacity and to be able to enter into the German market, linked to the core networks that was described previously by the German ministry, representative of the German ministry. And clearly, we see here an opportunity because GRT Gas Deutschland and Open Grid Europe are operating the mega gas pipelines. So it's two pipelines south of Germany, and the main purpose of those pipelines in the past was to transmit the Russian gas through Germany and to France. And of course, due to the war in Ukraine, those gas flows are now very limited, nearby zero, and there is clearly an opportunity here to repurpose one of the two mega pipelines and offer capacity to the hydrogen market with a lower cost, in fact, of repurposing compared to building a new pipe. And clearly, this project linked the Spanish and Portuguese market to France and to Germany, and it gives a whole whole integration to the European market all around the European corridor. Maybe to give a conclusion, and I will be short in order to answer to questions. Clearly, as GRTGAS and our other partners in this corridor are willing to develop this project, we are willing to take some risk in terms of development, meaning we are now launching the pre-FEED studies without having a clear market commitment, not yet public subsidies, but it's clear that it's part of our strategy to be here and to satisfy the future hydrogen market. But still, we need to reach some conditions in order to take our final investment decision in the future and be ready for the 2030 target. So by conditions, I mean, we need to have ambitious hydrogen national strategy. The revision of the Spanish and French strategy are ongoing, but we are still waiting for the publication. If I describe a little bit the current France strategy, in the current France strategy, there is no word around infrastructure or around the interest of the H2Med corridor. And we are expecting, of course, that the next strategy will have a stronger focus on this aspect and how France can integrate the broader European market. Clearly, we also need a regulatory framework. So the trilogue is ongoing on the EU gas package with a lot of provisions around hydrogen market regulation. And it's clearly important for us to have the visibility of what will be, in fact, needed in Europe in terms of market organization. And of course, we will need to have the national law in order to have all the package, the regulatory framework. Some countries are more advanced than others. Clearly, Germany is leading now in Europe on this aspect, how to regulate infrastructure. But we will, of course, have the same kind of discussion in France or in Spain. Public subsidies are important in this beginning of the market. And of course, we are now applying to PCI, and we are very confident that the different projects are described will be in the final list of the PCI project. And this will open the possibility to apply to the Connecting Europe Fund by the end of next year. And it's clearly will be an important part of the funding of the corridor. We also apply to some national schemes, and it's interesting indeed to see what's going on in Germany, because in Germany we are not discussing around public subsidy, direct public subsidy, but more a kind of state guarantee for the operator, meaning that the state is responsible for the energy policy and for the development of hydrogen. And in case of failure of this policy, and if the market is not developing high enough, then the transmission operator will be covered from some part of the investment. And it's clearly an interesting approach for a state. Not subsidizing all infrastructure, but giving some confidence for us to invest. But clearly at the end, and I want to insist on this aspect, we need also customers' commitments. So far, H2Med have received first expression of interest from producers or from consumers of hydrogen. But clearly, it's really first expression of interest, and we need to engage with those market players in order for them at the end to commit. And by commitment, we mean long-term contract, capacity booking in the transmission system. It's clearly a need, and it was the case for the big natural gas infrastructure or for the big electricity, the main electricity infrastructure. We will need the same kind of commitment from market players in order to have sufficient credibility in our business plan in order to invest and develop the whole corridor. So clearly, there is still a long road to go to meet the 2030 target to put in operation the H2Med corridor, but we are quite confident that the market players will at some point be very interested in this project and will commit through long-term contracts. Thank you.
Thank you for your enlightening speech, Anthony. And here I've got some questions for you. The first one is from our audience, Martin. And I think the question is, are there any plans for large-scale hydrogen storage as part of the H2Med initiative to balance the supply and demand?
Clearly, as explained, underground storage and massive storage are clearly part of the interest to have such an infrastructure as the H2Med corridor. GRTgaz is not an operator of underground storage, but we are discussing a lot with companies like Stefanie or Geomethane or other operators in the corridor. And clearly, we see first expression of interest from the market around storage. For example, Spain has no real capacity to develop salt caverns. The geology is not appropriate to develop such storage. It is the case in part of France. It is the case also in Germany, and clearly there is an interest from Spanish producers to have access to storage through the H2Med corridor. It's clearly key in order for them to benefit from lower price coming from photovoltaic generation, for example, and of course to stop the electrolyzer when the price market are too high and still be able to deliver hydrogen to the final consumers, to the industrial customers that, of course, need security of supplies and need a stable, steady access to hydrogen. So yes, underground storage is clearly a key aspect of the corridor.
Thank you. And the second question from our audience, Peter. Do you see the hydrogen market to become a decentralized market with many small and medium-sized suppliers and decentralized demands, or driven by the big energy-consuming industries, a more centralized tendency dominated by the big companies associated with high-tech and high-invest capacities?
At this stage of the market, we clearly see both, in fact, aspects. Very local projects linked to mobility mainly, and the economic of mobility is totally different from the economic of the industry, for example. So there is, we think, room for such project with very locally produced hydrogen and maybe very small, limited networks or storage locally. But if we speak about the main hydrogen consumers, meaning steel industry, chemical industry, I would say big mobility such as airports, such players are in demand of competitiveness, and it's clear that economy of scale is part of the answer in terms of competitiveness. They are looking for security of supplies, not depending of only one local producers, but being able through a transmission system to connect to several producers, to underground storage, and have access to a strong security of supply. So at the end, we believe that the more centralized approach is clearly important for big players in the market. But you know, it was the same in the history of electricity and gas. SUSE energy started in Europe very locally with local production, very limited networks. But at some point, economy of scales are clearly here, and we believe it will be the same at the end for hydrogen.
Thank you. And one last question from our side. How do you understand the policy supports planned for hydrogen pipeline permitting and investment?
We are clearly receiving strong support from the European Commission through the PCI project. It's clear that the European Commission, through the Repower EU communication and then the PCI process, is pushing for such infrastructure as the H2Med corridor. The only aspect is the schedule, in fact, of this scheme, because if we want to be in operation in 2030, there is the time is running, and speaking about such infrastructure as the H2Med corridor, it takes a long time, and permitting is lengthy. All the engineering process are quite long, so we need quite fast answer from the European Commission, but it's the same from the national government. Speaking about France, H2Med corridor was in fact announced by the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. The President announced the Barma project end of last year. He then announced the extensions, the Hyphen project, to connect to Germany. So there is a strong political will. This political will is still it needs to be translated into a strategy and into a subsidy scheme, and we will be very interested to see this translation going quick in order to be ready by 2030.
Thank you so much for your answer, Anthony, and thank you again for joining us today. As I can see, there are like 4 or 5 questions left in our Q&A box, so we also welcome you to answer them. Type your answers in our Q&A box. And now let's welcome our next speaker, Mr. Diogo Almeida, Head of Business Development for Hydrogen, HVO, and e-fuels at Galp, who will share Galp's vision for green hydrogen development and investment. Welcome, Diogo. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Eileen. Good morning, everyone. I'll share my screen. Hope everyone is seeing this. So I will go through, first of all, an overall view on what we do and our strategy on hydrogen, and then I'll zoom in on the FID we've just announced for the first 100 megawatts at our refinery in Sánchez in Portugal, which is basically a consequence of our strategy. We are an integrated energy company. We are present in 3 continents, have upstream activity in Brazil and in Africa. We have a refinery, a large refinery in southern Portugal, and industrial assets in Iberia, energy management activity in the 3 continents I've just mentioned. Then we have downstream activity in Portugal, Spain, and in Africa, and we've been developing a large renewable portfolio both in Iberia and Brazil, with aggressive targets moving towards 2030, and also some new businesses. Hydrogen began this way. Right now it has been incorporated to the industrial business unit. That's the natural consequence of developing new businesses. We also have a lithium refining project ongoing on new businesses. Why do we believe Galp has what it takes to develop green hydrogen projects? First of all, we have a deep know-how on hydrogen. We are the largest producer of hydrogen in Portugal at our refinery, 60,000 tons of hydrogen per year. Replacing it requires around 600 megawatts of electrolysis. We have also a large experience in operating chemical and industrial sites. We have a destination for the hydrogen. We have assets that we need to decarbonize, but we are obviously fully compromised with this transition, and we also have a renewables portfolio that will allow us to have an integrated approach to the hydrogen value chain. And finally, we have also a very relevant portfolio of B2B and B2C clients who will need to decarbonize their own footprint, and we want to help them with having all the solutions in our portfolio for them to do that. So our hydrogen strategy, our unit started its first name was hydrogen. Right now it's hydrogen, HVO, and e-fuels, and I think this kind of reflects the transition we're going through and the way we see this value chain developing in the coming years. We have 4 pillars in our strategy. The first one, in which I will focus afterwards, is what we call gray to green. And as I mentioned, we have the goal to fully replace the gray hydrogen in our refinery in Sines with green hydrogen. This will allow us to reduce emissions, CO2 emissions, in 25% by 25% in our refinery. Our second pillar, maritime and aviation fuels. We know that roughly 2/3 of the emissions from the energy sector can be replaced and surpassed through electrification. But at least 1/3, we believe, on sectors like maritime transportation, aviation, even in heavy duty road transportation, may not be electrified. And for that purpose, we want to develop these molecules that will be the low carbon fuels for these segments in the future, and work with our clients towards that. Thirdly, as I said, we also believe that in road mobility, hydrogen will play a role, and we want to help our clients in Portugal and Spain by developing an HRS network and allowing them to gradually replace their fleets with fuel cell trucks and buses and decarbonize their activities. And fourthly, and on several industries, we also believe electrification is not the only solution, and hydrogen will be relevant, replacing the role of natural gas. And we are also working on developing projects with some key clients on doing that. So we have ceramics, glass industry, steel industry, several industries that cannot fully electrify their activity. Going back to the first pillar, what we call gray to green, what we want is to make sure that the assets we have, our refinery in Sines and the whole Sines ecosystem is able to decarbonize gradually towards 2050, moving towards carbon neutrality. And for that, but also at the same time, trying to minimize the cost of transition, and trying to use all the assets we have today and adapt them to a lower carbon environment. Okay, we know green hydrogen will be crucial on doing this. It will be the backbone of this transformation. in any large industrial complex with a refinery. Sines has excellent conditions, deep water ports, great location in the Atlantic coast, and also already very large industries playing a role there. So we are starting by replacing the hydrogen that we use in our processes today, and this allows us to decarbonize already the products that we are selling, the diesel, the jet fuel that we sell today, so lowering the carbon footprint of these products, while we still need to work on developing the other products that will replace these products moving forward. So we started with, I mentioned a while ago, we'll need around 600 megawatts to fully replace the hydrogen that we produce today in the steam methane reformers with green hydrogen. We have recently approved FID the first 100 megawatts of this journey towards the full replacement of gray hydrogen. You can see here the site location and where the hydrogen plant will be located. We also have approved an investment for an HVO plant nearby, which also will allow us to start supplying SAF to the market for HVO for the diesel pool. Also, this plant will use around 10,000 tons of hydrogen per year, so it will increase the demand for hydrogen overall at the site, and this is taken into consideration in our full scope for the hydrogen production at the site. How did we get here, and what has taken us to approve, to FID a plant like this? I think this is one of the purposes of this presentation. Also, is shown how it is possible to reach an FID for a large-scale hydrogen production plant. So, first of all, from an economic point of view, what were the challenges? And still are in certain aspects. So it's still a work in progress, although with enough confidence to do the FID. We know that green hydrogen requires relevant incentives. They can either be sticks or carrots. I think we have, from a regulatory point of view, we see the obligation to gradually replace our transportation pool with renewable products. We already have that with biofuels first generation. This target has been increasing and will increase towards the end of this decade. And hydrogen for the refining process is accountable for this. This is how refiners are looking at the use of green hydrogen and valuing it, that green hydrogen. So when we replace a molecule of gray hydrogen with green hydrogen, basically, what are we replacing it? We are replacing the natural gas that we used to produce the gray hydrogen with green electrons. We are at the same time lowering our emissions, which we also take into consideration, given we're part of the ETS system. And we also believe we have a green premium to meet the RED 2, further on RED 3 targets. So this is how we do this. Challenges that we have, anyone familiar with the hydrogen landscape, the green hydrogen landscape in Europe is also familiar with these 3 points I've put here, coming out of the delegated acts on hydrogen production. additionality, synchronism, and geographical correlation. So constraints for the system. So this basically forces us to have a more constrained operation and to plan accordingly, to make sure that we optimize according to this regulation, and obviously this creates some challenges in terms of operation too, because if temporal correlation, which now is monthly until the end of the decade, moves towards hourly, it will force all the system to an adaptation to this. So we've had those challenges in optimizing the operation and looking at it past 2030. Also, from a technical and industrial point of view, you can see here the plot for the plant. We've been going through a lot of work in the past 3 years, because it's not just electrolyzers, there's a lot of stuff around it. And in our case, the connection to the refinery, and from an operation point of view, making sure this integration with the refinery does not menace the operation of the refinery. We cannot, any stoppage that we might have in one of our refinery units would cost millions of euros, and so we really need to be careful on how we operate this new plant, and we need to understand that we are basically connecting electrons with molecules by producing hydrogen, and this has challenges of its own, because we are talking about different markets with different timings in terms of market conditions. So this is really challenging. It has been so far. It will be going forward. We expect the timeline for the project right now is to have, we're starting the works already, have the first molecules by the end of 2025, and having COD in the beginning of 2026. This will allow us to produce around 10,000 tons of hydrogen per year, and we're looking forward to developing the remainder phases of this project, so to reach the 600 megawatts in the coming until the end of the decade. So, in a nutshell, what took us here? Why green hydrogen? So it will allow us to decarbonize a molecule that we use in our process for refining, for HVO production. We believe regulation supports the business case. Not only this business case, it will support other business cases going forward. So it will support, we believe it will support the other molecules like methanol or other e-fuels, as long as technology is there. I didn't mention the huge challenge from a technological point of view, because we know that this industry is still proving its way. It's really recent. We haven't seen collectively the capacity to supply the market with the electrolyzers that we need. And so I think one of the big challenges we face is making sure we have the technological support to bring the capacity that the European Union targets have, the 20 million tons per year of hydrogen by the end of the decade. So we want to build a position on this low carbon market, and to keep supplying our clients with the products they need. We believe we have one of the most competitive LCOEs in Europe, in Portugal and Spain. This obviously helps our business case. We have the renewable portfolio under development in Iberia, which allows us to have an integrated view on this value chain. and we will use green hydrogen to produce RFNBOs to introduce RFNBOs in our pool. And why now? The way we did it, we do believe that those coming first will have higher initial margins, as historically has happened in industrial investments like this. We want to develop a stepped approach. So this are the first 100 megawatts. We expect to have 2 additional phases moving forward to completely replace the gray hydrogen with green hydrogen at our refinery, and to build this position that will allow us also to develop other projects in this value chain in the future. We are already finishing feasibility studies for green ammonia and methanol, so we are also already looking at this. We have a lot of R&D projects around e-fuels also, both in Portugal but also in Brazil. And as I usually mention in this sort of conversations, this is a marathon, so we need to understand it that way. We will be developing projects like this for the coming decades, and we need to do it right, and that's what we believe we've done and we are doing until now with this project. But now we have 2 very rough years ahead to make sure that we do deliver this project the way it was approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this illuminating speech. And here are some questions from our side. The first one is, green hydrogen production at an acceptable cost necessitates a local power source and purchasing at competitive prices. So how can we facilitate this?
Well, first, I don't think it requires a local source. I think it requires a regional source at least. Because large-scale projects for hydrogen or other sort of molecules that require a large amount of green hydrogen, local sourcing is unsustainable in some cases, and really hard to do so. We do believe that we need to increase the capacity, the transmission capacity in our grids, in order to bring the electrons from places where they are easier to and make more sense to produce, and then to produce the hydrogen near the end user. I won't go into obviously we have other opportunities like the H2 net pipe that was mentioned in the previous presentation, but looking at end users like the ones we are doing, we believe that the hydrogen molecule should be near the end use, and we need to bring the electrons in. Okay, this has also challenges from a transmission grid point of view, but easier than developing the renewable projects around. So I think what we really need, this is a supply and demand balance. If we increase the demand for electrons, because we do believe hydrogen will allow us to decarbonize the energy sector in Europe at a faster pace, and it's the only way to replace in the long term the natural gas demand we have today. Then we need to increase the renewable capacity at the same pace. Otherwise, the pool prices won't come down, and everyone will have a huge disappointment. So licensing processes need to be much faster. I think European regulation imposes or mentions 2 years, but reality is that the average in almost all European countries is around 4 years for licensing renewable projects. And this way, obviously, we'll have a supply shortage. For me, this is the most important thing. We need more electrons coming into the system.
Thank you. And the second question is, what is your projection for the growth of the hydrogen market over the next 5 years? And which market do you anticipate to be the most promising or lucrative?
I think if we want to develop at scale, we need to look at where we have the hydrogen demand today. And because that's also where it's easier to pay for the transition, okay? And we know that the two, by far, the two main off-takers are refiners and ammonia producers, okay? So I think this is where we should invest first, because this is where we have clear offtake today, and this will help build large-scale hydrogen, green hydrogen projects. Then we can start looking at how to replace the natural gas demand in the industrial sectors. But think about it. If we do this in refineries and ammonia producers, we are already releasing natural gas. The natural gas that we are not using in the steam methane reformers to produce the hydrogen at those facilities. So I think from an economic point of view and a logistic point of view, I think this is really what makes sense. This is what we are doing already in our refinery, and we are really focused on doing that. And then hopefully we do believe that we'll start to have other projects in large scale natural gas consumers that will start replacing the natural gas with hydrogen, but it will take time. It's still not competitive for them, not very easy to do. We'll start to have also mobility clusters for buses and trucks. But if we want to do this at a large scale, we need to focus on these two markets.
Thank you for your detailed answer, Diogo. And thanks again for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye-bye.
And now it's time to delve into our final topic for today's session. We extend a warm welcome to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Thierry Leperc, founder and president of Hydeal, who will enlighten us with the remarkable journey behind the world's largest green hydrogen project. Welcome, Thierry. The stage is now yours.
Thank you, Arlene. I'll share my screen in a minute. So, very happy to be here. And hydrogen is it's a long march. It's a long march that started many years ago for some of us. And what we have heard from the previous speakers is both something which is encouraging, because things are moving, especially on the infrastructure side. I think the H2MAT project, what was presented by GRT Gas, is extremely encouraging. At the same time, we're seeing a big question mark in what are the economics of hydrogen, and can we make it work or not? And obviously making it work means fundamentally reaching market competitiveness. And this is what we have meant to do at Hydeal. Hydeal started from a vision which was laid out 5 years ago when I first published the book, Hydrogen is the New Oil. And in order for hydrogen to be the new oil, a new zero carbon oil, what is essential is to have mass scale production on one side. We're talking about 100 million barrels per day to replace, ultimately. This is what we want to do if we want to go to zero carbon. At the same time, it means being competitive, and that's the biggest challenge. And yes, to bring infrastructure together. And the way we saw that when we started Hydeal Ambition, a grouping of 30 companies in 2020, was to say, let's replicate the oil and gas approach of integrating upstream, midstream, and downstream, and bringing together around the same table companies that represent the upstream of green hydrogen. Obviously, here we're talking about green hydrogen, electrolyzers and engineering firms, and mostly importantly, renewable energy generation. And midstream, we've heard about midstream a lot, and I think that's very, very important, the transmission and storage, without which nothing can happen. Because in the end, hydrogen, I know the question was raised, is it going to be centralized or decentralized? If we want it to be competitive, that's very simple. It will have to be produced in places, quite remote places where it's competitive, which means that, yes, it will be centralized and infrastructure will come there. And obviously the key players that we brought around the table at High Ambition was the off-takers, and asking them the question, very simple question, under which condition will you be able to buy hydrogen, green hydrogen? What volumes at what prices? In order to answer that question, we moved from 2 years ago into a detailed feasibility study of a project in northwestern Spain, in Asturias. Close to 10 million euros was invested over that period, or looking at the complete supply chain from project development in the Castilla and Leon region, looking at engineering, looking at transmission and storage, and Enagas was a partner in that study, and looking at offtake, especially focusing on offtake for key industries based in Asturias, in steel making and fertilizers. Now, that feasibility study came to a conclusion 6 months ago and led to the next stage, the third stage of Hydeal, which is the creation of Hydeal España, which is basically an asset company, an independent hydrogen producer, aiming at producing 150,000 tons of hydrogen from 2028, with 4.8 gigawatts of solar at its basis. So what is behind that? And I think to get back to the question, how can we reach competitiveness? And I was surprised, or not surprised, but intrigued by the fact that we've had close to 2 hours of conversations and nobody's mentioned the price that needs to be reached for this market to happen. And it's like, and we have to know that a market without a price is not a market. It's not a business. And what we have done over the years with Hydeal Ambition, Hydeal Asturias, and now Hydeal España, is to address the question, what is that price and how can we reach it? And the answer to the first question is that 2.5 or 2.5 to 3 euros, but certainly closer to 2.5 euros, is where the market is. It's higher than the, that's roughly 60 plus euros per megawatt hour. That's higher than the natural gas prices, which are around a little lower than 50 euros today. But if you add a carbon value, this is where off-takers in industry, in energy and mobility are ready to pay the product over the long-term contracts, which is what you need, obviously, to finance those projects. And the question is, how do you reach that level of competitiveness? And our model that we have worked on for many, many years right now has 4 components. One is captive solar. We're talking about a large-scale PV. Why PV? Because that's where you're going to have the lowest cost of power generation by far cheaper than any other source, whether renewable or not. Then you want to standardize electrolysis, something that has been mentioned. We're still at the early stages of the electrolysis industries, even though it's a very old technology. And yet the key to make it happen is already to think how you can standardize those projects. The third element, which was discussed, is to have dedicated midstream, not blending, not repurposing, to have dedicated new pipelines. And this is what Enagas is doing in Spain, what GRT Gas is planning right now with its various projects, as was mentioned. And then we need to aggregate offtake, not just have one off-takers, to have long-term, up to 20 years offtakes, because if we don't have those offtake agreements, no bank will finance the project. And we have to think there again, like in the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry was built by long-term offtake contracts, and this is and hydrogen needs to reach that level as well. Now, how do we reach that? And I'd like to focus, really give a strong focus on the key to the competitiveness of hydrogen, and that is solar. We have and I'm speaking this about experience because my first company started built 3 gigawatts of solar projects from 2006 to 2018 before being sold to the NG Group. And we were a pioneer. My former company was a pioneer of competitive solar, and the exponential growth of solar that you see on the left-hand side is something that was completely experienced by my former company. And what we have reached, and people don't realize today how cheap solar has become. We have today prices of cells and module prices which have reached record low levels, with minus 40% in the last 6 months. Can you believe that? And the target price of solar power, which by the way was reached in auctions in 2018 and 19, we're talking about lower or around or lower than 15 euros per megawatt hour. Those levels were reached in 2019, and we're ready to get back to that, even though obviously interest rates have gone up. But still, the target price of 15 euros per megawatt hour is essential. And by the way, if we have power at that price, yes, we can have a competitive hydrogen at 2.5 euros or even lower. Now, what we need to have as well is the same ramp up, the same exponential ramp up on electrolysis. And the good news is that we have right now a number of companies across the world, especially in China, which are ramping this capacity. What we need is really to have the market really take off for this experience curve to set in. But what we can say, just on the basis of the first production figures and announcements which have been made by companies like Longi, Peric, Envision, and some others, is that the roadmap, the road to that exponential growth of electrolyzer capacity is underway. Now, obviously, electrolyzer is just a part of the equation. EPC is another a very important dimension. It needs to be addressed so that ultimately the delivered cost of hydrogen is indeed competitive with fossil fuels. As far as we're concerned at Hydeal España, it's not just talk, it's not just a vision, it's a series of projects. We have secured close to 5 gigawatts of sites to date, and as well supply agreements with a final investment decisions for our projects in 2026 to start production in 2028 to deliver the hydrogen to a variety of hubs across Spain to start with, and the way we're going to do it is to leverage on the very bold announcements which was made by Enagás a few months ago of deploying close to 3,000 kilometers of pipelines across Spain, and obviously with that connection to France, which was mentioned by Antonio Mazaga earlier. The approach here is what we call industry circles. Hydrogen produced in those areas where you have large-scale renewable production in remote places in Spain, Portugal, and obviously as well North Africa. I'll talk about that in a minute. Needs to be delivered to those industrial hubs. In our case, in Spain, we're looking at those industrial hubs in northern Spain, and what we have today is very interesting initiative. I'll just mention one of them in the Tarragona area. You have today the whole chemical cluster, which is getting together and addressing its demands of 300,000 tons to producers in the across Spain, and this capacity of companies to get together in the same location and to negotiate long-term contracts is the way to go. It has been mentioned many times that hydrogen needs offtake to take off, and that offtake needs to be industry-based. By the way, obviously the incentive schemes are welcome, but if you think about it, 20 million tons of hydrogen, which is the ambition of the European Union, as we heard, by 2030, if you have just €1 per kilogram of subsidy, and most people are asking today numbers which are far higher than that, that would cost 200 billion euros over a period of 10 years, which is over 250 times what the European Commission has set up for the European Hydrogen Bank. So the message here is that off-takers will sign provided it's competitive. Subsidies will not work for those volumes at all. But if you aggregate those volumes, and yes, can reach the economies of scale, then there is a possibility to structure those contracts, and this is the basis of the Hydeal España model. Now, Hydeal España is not just about Spain; it's about a global vision to go to much bigger volume. A year ago at COP27, the European Investment Bank, the International Solar Alliance, and Hydeal presented a study of indicating the production simulation of 50 million tons of hydrogen in Africa, 1/2 of it in Northwestern Africa, Mauritania, and Morocco by 2035. Now, all of this will not happen without pipelines, not just the pipelines connecting Spain to France and Germany, but also pipelines going further south. And this is what we're right now involved together with the governments of Mauritania and Morocco as well. And yes, the message is very simple. The very big volumes that Europe wants, those 20 million tons or more at competitive prices, will come from those areas which have the biggest areas to produce hydrogen, the proximity to the sea to produce to produce water, and yes, to do it in a fast fashion. One thing is important: if we want to have those projects on the ground, we need to have those offtake contracts signed. We need to have those EPC contracts signed. And most importantly, we need permitting, and this is one of the key things that needs to be mentioned. That permitting in Europe is very tricky, takes time, and what we see right now in the Morocco and Mauritania situation is that gigawatt scale projects are being permitted far faster, which will allow this vision of what we call the string of pearls, the string being the pipeline infrastructure and the pearls being the hydrogen hubs. And I will finish with that. Europe today has embarked in an immensely ambitious journey of decarbonization, but the question as well is about reindustrialization. And reindustrialization means to bring cheap energy to those hubs, the Texas way of doing things. If we don't have that cheap hydrogen, every single energy intensive business in Europe will close. We need cheap zero carbon energy to supply those hubs. And right now, I mentioned Tarragona, we're also working with Marseille. A big event will be organized early January, together with the regional government of Provence and the Cap Energy Cluster and Mission Possible Partnership, with the following question: how can we help reindustrialization by providing mass-scale cheap hydrogen to those industrial hubs? So hydrogen is not just, then again, a decarbonization play, it's a reindustrialization play for Europe and obviously for Africa. Just imagine that still plants are right now being planned in Mauritania and Morocco, chemical plants as well, massive investments in those areas, which will be a very important opportunity for the development of those countries, not just Europe, but also of those countries. But all of this will only happen if we, as a value chain, as a supply chain, get to that magic number of 2.5 euros per kilogram.
Thank you so much for the impressive and informative speech, Thierry. And now let's see some questions from our audience. The first one is, what is your opinion on the potential of the green hydrogen market in Southern Europe?
Today there is no green hydrogen market to start with. And in order to have a market, you need to have offtake contracts. And that's a key message. And our opinion is very simple. If we stay at the level that most players are right now, of 4 or 5 euros per kilogram, waiting for subsidies that will not come, certainly not in dimensions, there will be no green hydrogen market in Europe, in Southern Europe. Now, if we sign those offtake contracts, and this is what we are doing at Hydeal, Spain, and this is really the basis of our business model, is to sign those long-term contracts. Then you have the beginning of a market, and obviously this market will only happen if you have, at the same time, the deployment of pipeline and underground storage infrastructure. So these two things need to come together: offtake and infrastructures.
Okay, thank you. And what do you think are the most critical technology gaps that still needs to be resolved in order to facilitate the widespread implementation of the hydrogen economy?
The first thing is not a technology gap, it's just taking advantage of the 1,000 gigawatt per annum solar PV capacity, production capacity, which is out there, mostly in China. 1,000 gigawatts. For those people who are not aware, right now the production pace, I'm talking the capacity in this case, the production pace of the PV industry in China is close to 2 gigawatts per day. 2 gigawatts per day. So this and we've reached solar modules at 12 cents per watt in Europe, which is completely compatible with those levels that I mentioned. So what we need to have, obviously on the electrolyzer side and on the EPC side, there's a gap. And our opinion is the gap will not be bridged by small scale companies like we have. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have many totally undersized electrolyzer companies that are not in a position to reach those levels. And yes, we need to realize that nothing will happen without collaboration, a very strong collaboration with Chinese industry. And this is another very important message which I want to send today. Europe, hydrogen will never be, there will be no hydrogen in Europe, green hydrogen, not in 10 years, not in 100 years, until people realize that leveraging the immense capacity which is available in China is the way to go. Obviously, leveraging on European capacity in EPC, in project development, in structuring, in infrastructures, in everything. Europe has tons of things, tons of companies which are relevant, but then again, it's not a technology gap. It's most importantly an industrial ramp-up gap that needs to be completely connecting Europe to Africa, because the hydrogen is going to come from Africa to China. This is what we call the triangle. And this triangle between Africa, Europe, and China is the way to answer those questions. And there again, read my lips. If that triangle doesn't work, nothing will happen. Hydrogen will not happen. And we at Hydeal España are at the heart of that triangle, working with our European basis, working with African companies, and yes, working with China, where we have a strong team.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer to all these questions, Thierry. And thank you again for joining us today.
A pleasure.
And now we come to the end of our webinar. Once again, I want to express my profound gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Ms. Hiesinger, Mr. Cabo, Dr. Stammler, Mr. Mazzana, Mr. Almeida, and Mr. Lepperg. Thank you so much for bringing us so many invaluable insights. A sincere thank you also extends to our valued audience for participating in today's Impact webinar. Regarding today's video and presentation slides, we'll share them both on our official website and on LinkedIn next Monday, along with some key insights of this webinar. If you have any further inquiries, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at aline@leaderassociates.com. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that this webinar serves as a virtual preview of our in-person event, Connecting Green Hydrogen Europe 2024. This event is scheduled to be held from June the 25th to 27th at IFEMA Madrid in Spain. We encourage you to secure your stand and be a part of this remarkable occasion. We eagerly anticipate the opportunity to meet you in person and engage in fruitful discussions. See you next time. Take care.